Look, batteries truly are the Swiss Army knife of electricity. They are incredible. They can do, everything, and they can do it fast. They can pump energy in, but then the really unique thing is they can take it out. They can suck up energy when there's a bit too much and balance the grid when there's an overvoltage problem as easily as when there's an undervoltage problem.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
Dead, buried, cremated.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
The Treasurer.
Australia's basically done for. We'll just end up being a third-rate economy. A banana republic.
How good is Australia?
Just follow the money.
G'day and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast demystifying the big economic issues in Australia and putting them in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute, and today we're going to take a break from men's appalling behaviour in Parliament House to talk about an issue that you probably only think about when things go catastrophically wrong. No, I'm not talking about not taking out flood insurance. I'm talking about the security of Australia's national electricity grid. At the moment, the Energy Security Board is getting ready to hand down a blueprint to redesign the national electricity market and make it fit for purpose. Basically, the problem is that our national electricity market was designed, ages ago for big stationary gas and coal burning power stations, not for wind farms, batteries and millions of solar panels dotting millions of roofs across Australia.
Australia's dirtiest coal-fired power station in Gippsland will close 4 years earlier than expected.
Government insists the closure won't lead to more blackouts.
Every Victorian can be absolutely confident that we will have more than sufficient power to meet all of our needs.
And the construction of the world's largest storage battery.
Cleaner energy future is just too important to leave to chance.
You've got to make sure that when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, you've got the power you need.
Canavan is calling on our government to consider nuclear energy as continued coal-fired power station closures.
That we need to keep the lights on.
We're talking this garbage that a battery's going to do it.
It says an increase in renewables and the introduction of clean energy targets means burning coal is becoming unviable.
Tens of thousands of people across New South Wales are still without power.
And 1.3 million properties across Victoria could be without power if coal and gas power stations are not restored to their full capacity.
State governments, regardless of their political hue, need to take responsibility for ensuring the stability of the system.
It shows that the Commonwealth Government are in a white-knuckled panic about national energy policy.
But with renewable energy cheaper to generate, there's hope the prices could come down.
We talk a lot about electricity generation, like coal-burning power stations or solar farms, but today we're not focusing on generation and not on reliability, but on the issue of the security of the grid, which is hardly ever talked about, but that does not make it unimportant. For an energy grid to function securely, it needs control systems that keep frequency and voltage within safe limits. Historically, this service has been mainly provided by coal, gas and hydro power stations. But could we get those same security services from renewables and batteries? Today we're doing a deep dive into making sure the lights stay on with the Australia Institute's energy lead, Dan Cass. G'day, Dan.
Hey, Eb.
So firstly, before we get into, the details of system security, can you give us a bit of an explanation or really set the scene by telling us about the post-2025 electricity market redesign? What is it and why do we need it?
Sure. So you remember a few years ago there was a blackout in South Australia and everyone sat down afterwards and realised that the grid had really been designed around old technologies that were progressively retiring, and we need to redesign the national electricity market for the solar and wind generation that's coming in. And that's all the redesign is about. It's a process run by the Energy Security Board to design the best future design for the electricity market to be implemented from 2025 onwards.
So really recognising that we're trying to reduce emissions, we're trying to keep power bills down, and we need to set up the market, to work for us for decades to come.
That's right. And look, solar and wind are unstoppable now. A good climate policy or a bad one would mean the difference between growth being very fast or not quite as fast, but it's inevitable. The growth is coming. it's unstoppable, and coal and gas are on the way out.
Yeah. So for those of us who kind of only think about our electricity when we get the bills for it, today we're going to be talking about security services. So it's not where we get energy from or the reliability of the electricity grid. It's something slightly different. What do we mean by security services?
Right. So reliability is whether there's enough supply to meet demand at any point in time. So when you turn on the appliance, there's enough energy there to power it up. Security means the balance between supply and demand within a second, within even parts of a second. It's this micro detail around the flow of current in the electricity wires and the frequency and the voltage, as you mentioned, being exactly within very tight tolerances. If the power isn't at the right frequency and voltage, then computers won't work, machines will trip, grid systems will fail. So it's incredibly important. It's a small detail seemingly, but it really matters when it doesn't work.
Mm. And so why is this important that we look at how historically security services have been provided and what's going to change? Like, why is this an issue that the Australia Institute has been focusing on?
So it's incredibly important because as coal power stations retire, we lose the security services that those generators provided. So these were huge, big spinning machines. They spin at 50, they produce 50 cycles per second of alternating current. And the current frequency is a function of these huge masses turning around. They have inertia. It's just like pushing something heavy up a hill or stopping it from going down a hill. And so the inertia resisted a change in the grid. So when the grid frequency went a bit too high, the turbine got it back down quickly, and vice versa. If the frequency dropped, the turbine just added a bit more power with its inertia. This is incredibly important. And historically, it's been seen as absolutely vital that coal and gas and hydro are there to provide this security for the grid. But of course, as coal retires, we need to find new ways of doing it. So we commissioned a report to find out, can it be done and how?
And so what did that report find?
Look, it was really inspiring. You know, we thought that batteries and solar and wind would at some point in the future be able to take on this security role in the grid. And we've found the future has come already. As is often with clean tech, the progress is faster than anyone realised. And already there are batteries doing these reliability services, these security services that coal did. And the incredible thing is they're doing it even better and perhaps cheaper than coal ever did, which is great news for consumers.
It sure is. So one of the key findings that struck me from this report was that batteries and demand response, and you might have to explain that again for listeners, already provided more than a third of frequency control in the market in the last part of last year, even though they hardly make up any of the grid's generation capacity. Can you just walk me through that?
Yeah, look, that's right. So there are a few batteries, large, big grid-tied batteries in the grid, and there's a huge fleet of coal-fired generators, and they both provide this thing called raise frequency regulation. So if the frequency drops, then over a period of 6 seconds, they pump extra energy in the grid and get everything right back to normal again. And the battery fleet is only 0.5% of the grid's generation capacity, and it's providing about a third of this frequency raise. So
let me just repeat that, because I find that quite extraordinary. So it's half of 1% of generation capacity, but it's already providing more than a third, or almost 40%, in fact, of the frequency control market.
Yeah, that's right. So the battery fleet is only something like a 70th as big as the coal fleet, and it's doing as much heavy lifting already in this critical frequency market.
Yeah, well, talk about punching above your weight.
Yeah, look, batteries truly are the Swiss Army knife of electricity. They are incredible. They can do, everything, and they can do it fast. They can pump energy in, but then the really unique thing is they can take it out. They can suck up energy when there's a bit too much and balance the grid when there's an overvoltage problem as easily as when there's an undervoltage problem.
Yeah, so something like the inertia capacity of the Yallourn coal-fired power station, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that set to close soon?
Right, so Yallourn is closing 4 years earlier in 2028.
Yep.
And there's obviously some concern that this means pulling 22% of generation capacity out of Victoria.
Mhm.
So it's a 1,480 megawatt coal plant. And on the day that Energy Australia announced that was going, they cleverly announced they're building a new battery much smaller at 350 megawatts, so about a quarter as big. And the researchers calculated that that battery will provide 3 times the inertia of a coal plant that's 4 times bigger.
So it's doing more with less, basically.
It's doing more with less. It's really quite extraordinary. So this just goes to show once we start building up that battery fleet, we can replace coal safely. And interestingly, they also found, looking at another aspect of this security, which is system strength, so that's a more local factor within parts of the grid. There was an area of the grid that's weak up in Queensland. There are 4 solar farms, and they were looking at building essentially a big spinning machine like a generator turbine, a thing called a synchronous condenser. And instead they just changed the electronic settings at 4 of these solar farms and produced the same remediation. So they fixed the problem for 4% of the cost of the conventional tech.
Holy moly, 4%.
Yeah.
Not like 4% less, but 4% of the total cost.
4% of the cost of the conventional tech. It's really quite extraordinary.
Oh my God. Think of the savings to electricity bills from that one thing alone. That's incredible.
Right, that's right. And we all pay for that. And that's the thing people should remember. So all this security stuff, it seems a bit, behind the curtain, but it's on our bills, let me tell you. We all do have to pay. This is a public good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's important that we get it done really well and efficiently.
Yeah. So are batteries more or less following the same trajectory as solar in that the more we use them and the bigger the market, that they're just getting cheaper and cheaper?
Exactly. And it's the same as with mobile phones and computers. You know that for the same price every 3 or 4 years, when you replace your mobile phone, you suddenly get this thing that's doing far more and far smaller and far better than the one that you had.
Mm.
It's just the same.
Yeah. And so what does the public think about all this? I believe there was some polling included as part of this research report.
Right. So we asked Australians what they thought about coal being paid to keep providing these services, or whether they'd prefer new technology. And 51% would prefer to pay for new batteries to keep the grid secure, and about 1 in 4, 26%, preferring that we keep paying coal generators to do what they've always done. So, clearly the public are up with the new technology. There's so many solar homes in Australia now, and increasingly people buying batteries to back up their solar production. And I think they're really embracing the future. They're looking forward to this.
Mm. And so I guess overall what coal is looking at is their business case just more or less keeps collapsing and getting worse. Am I wrong?
Right. Well, the chair of the Energy Security Board, Kerry Schott, was quoted in the papers just recently saying that there could be 4 or 5 coal generators poised to announce that they're leaving early, as Energy Australia announced with Yallourn just recently. So coal generators are increasingly uneconomic. They're not making money. Their owners are wanting to retire them and look for other sources of generation. But for this critical issue, which the Australia Institute picked, which is we need coal now to keep the grids secure. And until we provide new resources and new markets to incentivise things like batteries, we might be stuck in this awful position where we don't even need the power generated by coal, but we have to pay to keep it going just to keep the frequency stable, which would be a crazy situation.
Yeah, that sounds, particularly given the cost that you just talked about in Queensland in that little case study, you can see how that could quickly become massively expensive to the taxpayer or to households, as well as obviously terrible for the environment. But given that we're talking about this post-2025 market redesign, how much of the system is really set up just to benefit the coal and gas generators because they're the incumbents? Are there any barriers to batteries coming in and competing with the coal generators and hydro and the others providing those services at the moment?
Yeah, that's right. And that's what our work has been about at the Australia Institute, slowly opening up these markets so that the new technology can compete. And until you do that, the system is really a bespoke market created to help coal keep going. I mean, that's where the NEM came from, and that's in a way the momentum in all the rules and the standards and so on that say what you can do when you generate and how you can plug in storage and so on. It's all really designed around the old generation supplies, which were coal historically. So, of course, we've got to bust the markets open for batteries, and so solar can compete with system strength and all these exciting new things. And the price will go down as we decarbonise, and that's the exciting thing.
Yeah. I'm just remembering back to, and I don't think this is a security thing, I think maybe this was a reliability thing, but just thinking back to the big battery, the Hornsdale Power Reserve, the Tesla big battery in South Australia. And I remember that time there was like a blackout, or there was supposed to be one. There would have been one for like, I think it was a lightning strike or something happened to make the grid go down. And after the Prime Minister and others had kind of rubbished the big battery and likened it to the big prawn and all those other things, really deriding it.
By all means, have the world's biggest battery, have the world's biggest banana, have the world's biggest prawn. But that's not solving the problem.
Its ability to be able to respond very, very quickly to the different types of conditions that we see on the power system has been very encouraging for us.
And it actually avoided a blackout in South Australia because it was able to respond within, maybe not nanoseconds, but close to it. It really is the future, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Look, batteries and they're called inverter-based resources, so solar and even wind farms can change their power output within a fraction of a second. And it's called fast frequency response. And so in the future, we may not even need the inertia per se that coal provides, because we'll have this new digital resource that's faster and is fully decentralized. And, it's a bit like the internet. I mean, it's a good metaphor for thinking about these things. The old electricity system was this hugely centralized one. And in the future, it will be resources across the grid, not just putting in energy for supply, but putting in energy for security. And that's going to mean a completely different engineering design. And that's what the whole NEM redesign project is about.
Well, we might wrap it up there. Thank you, Dan.
Great.
This episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 30th of March, 2021, and things may have changed since recording. You can find our report at australiainstitute.org.au, where you can also find all our latest research and content, and we're on Twitter at the Oz Institute with an AUS. My Twitter handle is Ebony_Bennett with a _NTT, and Dan Cass is at Dan J Cass with a SS. This episode was produced by Jennifer Macy, and our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Stay safe out there, stay 1.5 meters away, and thanks for listening.